Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Frontiers of Knowledge. You see, whenever we see a person with a wide girth, with a bare belly, or with love handles, we try to shame that person, and the person himself many times does suffer from a certain sense of ennui, fatigue, disenchantment, and frustration. Because an expanding belly is a sign of bad health. It is a sign of a person who is not very active or has an organic problem. Whatever. It's not taken in a good way. And I'm amazed that we human beings who care so much for our physical bodies, do we care in the same way about our word, about your earth? And are you aware that the belly of the world is expanding every day? Now, what's a belly? The middle portion. The tropics of this world are expanding, and by the end of the century, that's by year 2100, the edge of the new subtropical zone would extend roughly from Sydney to Perth according to the projections. Now, what are the tropics? Tropics are the earth, that area of the earth where sun is directly overhead at least once a year. And this is zone between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, equator. On the south is one tropic, on the north is the other tropic. And the tropical climate occurs with a larger area, about 30 degrees either side from the equator. This subtropical zone is next to this broad region. And it is here you find the greatest warm deserts of the world. So if that equator area up to the tropics and subtropics is expanding, what do you call it? It's a bulging waistline of the earth. You see, the tropical atmosphere is growing in all directions. North, south, east, west. Since 1979, the waistline has expanded by 56 kilometers to 111 kilometers per decade in both hemispheres, both in the northern and in the southern hemisphere. Every 10 years, there's an increase of, say, 100 kilometers. So, if that thing keeps on expanding, and it's assumed by the scientists, I'm saying assumed, it's a projection. It may happen, may not happen, but the likelihood, the probability, the possibility that's happening, looking at the empirical evidence. The human activity, greenhouse gases, black carbon, warming of the lower atmosphere, and warming of the oceans is going to expand the subtropical zones, expand the waistline of the earth, expand the love handles. And if this thing continues, then as I said earlier, Perth, we will be in a subtropical zone which shall be dry. Are you worried? You should be. Not for yourself, but for your children. The result of this would be that the drought will worsen and overall rainfall would be decreased. There will be less rainfall in the most warm tropical zones. Now, poleward shifts from the north, from the equator to the North Pole and equator to the South Pole. So the shift of the tropical and subtropical zone, both towards the North Pole and the South Pole, is already happening. The only worrying aspect is that it's likely to accelerate And as subtropical cyclone moves, they shift rain away from the temperate zone, which depend on the winter rainfall. And the result of that, increased water scarcity and decreased agriculture output. Because when the area becomes desert, it's not that productive from the agriculture point of view. Decreased rainfall, lower water availability at the ground level, all around. The result is that already acute sense of food scarcity, acute feeling and shortage of food security increases still further. The water level, which is already precariously low, goes down still further. And the researchers say that the animals and the plants migrate to keep up. So what happens then? People living in tropical zones move to the subtropical zones. The subtropical zone move to the temperate and onward. So the migration level also increases. So one is the decrease in water, decrease in agriculture, increase in carbon, and increased migration. And when this migration expands, the result is a social chaos. Animals and the plants both migrate to keep up with the climate zone, and the biodiversity and ecosystem is threatened. What's still more worrying is that those species of animals and the plant life which cannot adjust to rapidly changing situation, they become extinct. You see, we have seen that in biodiversity hotspots, especially in southwest of Australia, there are no suitable lands at all for ecosystems. And the species move to keep pace with warming and drying trends. And this is already happening. The trend is there, the evidence is there, there is an expansion of pests, there is expansion of diseases into regions which were previously climatically unsuitable for them. Those diseases and those pests were not there, and now they are increasing. And as I like to discuss in my next episode, the thawing of the glaciers is going to increase the diseases, because all the microbes which are at present frozen will be unfreezed, will be thawed, and would be available for attack on the human beings. So the expanding tropics for Africa damage Australia. The expanding tropics of Asia harm Europe, Asia, and North America. So who is most vulnerable? Anybody, any country is vulnerable because of the increased pressure of migrant population. And at the edge of the subtropical zone, most of the countries like southern Australia would suffer badly. And this effect is already being felt in Australia. There are more hot days, more than 35 degrees. And you can see that the climate change is one of the reasons. So how do you face this? We need to pay attention to planned agriculture, mining, tourism, and most importantly, you have to anticipate the number of the high warm days and change and adjust your calendar according to that. Now, for example, let's take up, for example, a city, Darwin in Australia. It has 47 hot days in a year and a high carbon emission. Take up Delhi. It used to have 100 days, hot days, and now it has 180 hot days. So the number of hot days is increasing, and it's assumed by the year 2019, cities like Delhi, Calcutta, Madras, Karachi, Lahore are going to have hot days in the proximity of 300 to between 290 and 320 per year. And if the other areas have got to survive and the tropics have to survive, then there have to be climate adaptation strategies right now. Now, you require a bipartisan support from all levels of the government and a pan-global approach to climate adaptation. Now, I'm not talking of the global warming alone. I'm talking of something much more important and which people have been neglecting, the scientists have been neglecting. The mining activity has to stop. Mining is essentially taking out the resources from the earth, and it is utilizing your resources in a quicker manner. The mining affects the seismic plates, and it also affects the increased possibility of the water level going down. When you mine, you take the things away and the place becomes free to receive other things. So first, the possibility, the shock waves that travel and the vacuum that is there, not vacuum of the air, but the empty space that is there has to be filled in. Nature abhors vacuum. And on the surface of the earth, the expanding waistline further impacts the heart of the earth. So the mining activities is essentially injurious to the health of the world. How is it going to affect you? Maybe by the year 2100, you will not be around. But your children are going to be around. Your grandkids are going to be around. Are you not liable to answer their needs? Look after them? Should you be selfish? I don't mind people being selfish. Yes, selfishness is important. But should you be selfish to a fault? That's the point. So this expanding topic has escaped the attention of the scientists till today. They are worried about other things, the temperature of the mean temperature of the world is going to increase by 0.25% in the next 50 years. The sea levels are likely to increase by 3 centimeters. Yes. But this much worse problem is escaping the attention of the political leaders, is escaping the attention of the scientists and the policy makers. Did a single line in the Paris Agreement address this issue? No. And the basic issue is that increasing tropics are going to affect not only the demographics, not only the biodiversity, not only the water scarcity, not only the shortfall in agriculture, but also socially, culturally. When the migrations take place at a large level, it's a social upheaval. Social upheaval both for the migrants and for the host nations. It's a social upheaval for the children and the old, the vulnerable sections of society. So, why is it that the scientists and the political leaders have not talked about it? Simply because of the fact that they want to raise the issues which can excite and keep people busy rather than the serious issues. They think that this problem is too big to be tackled, so let's ignore it. Push it under the carpet. As if pushing it under the carpet is going to solve it. I hope this episode gives you food for thought to decide what is more important. Isn't the health of the world, the earth, the planet, with its bulging waistline, a matter of concern for you? If it's not, it should be. Think about it. Thank you.